Alright, this is the final project of the semester, and in this video we're going to see how we can learn some tricks to better model our gear for our character. So what you're seeing right now is the character that I'm going to demo for this video, for this project. The previous chapter I was working with another character called Axe. Well, this is Ogre Magi, and I've already done work on him, so I figured it'd be a good way to kind of just go through and show the final result and get you guys started off really nicely. So why don't we review the pre-production of what we had from last semester or from last chapter. So I'm going to bring in my project folder here, and you can see all the different folders I have here. If I look on my reference, then I have my collage here. There we go. So these are all the pieces of gear that I'm kind of going for. I'm kind of going for a little troublemaker type of a theme. I even was able to do a little paint over. I was able to take a screenshot of my Ogre Magi without any gear on to kind of give me an idea of how I should approach it. So I just took a screenshot, went into Photoshop, and did some paint overs to kind of get some ideas fleshed out. But I'm not going to require you guys to do that. And it's a relatively easy process if you follow the rendering tutorial that will be included at the end of this video. So if you want to go ahead and maybe do some concepting work, go ahead and see how you can render out images out of Maya. So you can get some screenshots of just your blank character, and then you can do some paint overs yourself to do a little bit of concepting. But I'm not going to require it. I also have, some screenshots of the final product I did. There's a work in progress. There's another work in progress I was doing. Those will be necessary whenever you turn in your project. So just getting some nice screenshots of your character will help, like so. And that'll be covered later in the video. And I got my source files folder, my original Ogre Magi Maya file, the OBJs I exported out, and his original color maps I was able to bring in and create some textures off of and apply them to my scene inside of Maya. So here's my Ogre Magi. I have a layer just for his body, and I got it locked out so we can't touch it. This is him with no gear on. Here's his original gear that Steam. I almost said Blizzard. It's because he's inspired by a World of Warcraft character. So here's his original gear that came with him. All right, we can see he has a weapon, some headpieces, like a little cape, his belt, and some arm pieces over here and here. Why don't I just go ahead and show you guys what I came up with myself as the final product. I have a lollipop weapon. I made a little dunce hat and a little beanie, propeller beanie hat. He's got an oversized toy wristwatch and a nice little bag of marbles, and of course a whoopee cushion and some fireworks string to his belt. And of course he's got the the shirt that doesn't quite come over his belly. And how can you go wrong with suspenders? So in this video, I'm not going to show you how I model every single object. At this point, you guys should have enough modeling chops to make some basic props like you see here. That's just a cone extruded up. This is just half of a sphere with a few extrusions. So nothing too terrible to learn how to model and everything. And this is just a mesh with a concave little portion where I can fit just a bunch of spheres for his marbles. And that whoopee cushion was really easy to make as well. All right, so that's basically what I've made for this character. And why don't I go through and let's take a closer examination for our character here, and we can kind of get in and see the topology of some of this gear that I've made. And I've made them all subdivision, all high poly. But if we just go into low poly mode, just select everything, go to low poly mode, you can see it's not that scary of geometry. So why don't we look at his head pieces real quickly. And I'm going to hide his body. This was literally just a cone that I extruded upwards. And you'll notice that for a lot of these pieces, I deleted all the inside faces. If they're not being seen, then I didn't use them. And I do have kind of like a little buffer inside piece where it kind of extrudes upwards right here, just to make sure that the models fit flushly on the head, kind of just float them on top. And it's going to be a little bit of intersections. You just can't help that. My beanie hat was literally just a sphere I cut in half. And I didn't spend too much time trying to make this continuous object. The propeller itself is floating pieces of geometry just crammed in there. And I gave him a little bit of a jester's crown where I just extruded each face individually. Um, so if we go to edit mesh and extrude, I had turned off, let me just make a quick extrusion real quick. I turned off keep the faces together off, and I was able to extrude multiple faces separately, like so. And that's all I did for his little crown there. All right. So his weapon, originally I thought I was going to do maybe a rubber chicken, but I also gave myself some reference images to, let me pull that up, to maybe even do like a big lollipop weapon. You can see these people, oversized lollipops with the swirl and everything. And I was going to go in and make the swirl through normal maps, so I just gave myself just a nice flat area. But I did go in and model in a few bytes here. So I was just using the split tool. Oh, that's the sculpt tool. I was just using the multi-cut tool to come in and, you know, draw some cuts like that. And of course, so when I was modeling it, let me finish this. When I was modeling this, I had an edge loop down the center, like so, where I can only had to model the front half, and then I mirrored it over to the back half. So that allowed me to come in here and really just kind of delete these faces for the crunch. And then it was just a simple matter of just extruding faces inwards like that. Of course, that's a bad example, really doing fast modeling there, but you can see the multi-cut tool allowed me to really get in here and carve out some detail. And the handle was just a floating piece of geometry stuck into the bottom there. The belt is very interesting. This is one of the most complex pieces of geometry. Really, it's just a bunch of floating pieces of geometry. I can even go in and do a mesh separate, so you can see all the individual pieces. This is literally just a ring of faces around with some nice support edge loops. And there is my little pouch. So let me see if I can do a center pivot on this and just bring it out for the time being. So it kind of started out as just a cube, and then I did some extrusions and just extruded out a nice little concave area for the marbles. And to be honest, I probably didn't really have to extrude that much inwards. Um, I could have just made it really kind of flat, like right here, because the marbles were going to hide that back piece anyway. So I went a little bit over above and beyond with the modeling there. About the hardest part of this was extruding up the leather straps, and it wasn't too terrible. It was just a matter of extruding faces up and then positioning the strap so it went in and out of this little buckle, and I left this one undone right there. Marbles, of course, just a bunch of spheres, all kind of nicely placed. Um, yeah, there's places where they're intersecting. That's just the name of the game. If you're going to do something like this, don't spend too much time trying to make sure that no faces are intersecting, but they're all completely sitting on top of each other perfectly. That could be a pain in the butt. And the whoopee cushion is literally just a cube that I extruded and tweaked and messed around with the edge scale and all that stuff. The buckle, just another cube, almost like a window frame. Now the fireworks, that was a little bit more complex to make, and I will go over how I made this later on in the video, because there's some really cool techniques we could use to create this belt right here to make it a little bit easier to conform it around the body of our ogre or your character. His back was actually just a shirt that I made. Originally, he had a little cape, as you can see right there. But I decided I wanted to make a little dumb belly shirt that he couldn't quite put on all the way. And I even went in and cut out some holes and made it a little tattered. And I will show an example of how I was able to use the pre-existing model of my ogre here to just draw the shirt on top of his body as a separate piece of geometry. And I'll show you guys how we do that later in the video as well. And the arms are just suspenders and a watch. Again, I'll show us how we can create geometry based on our original model. So you just draw the suspenders on top of the body, and then just extrude them out to give them some width, give them some mass. All right, so that's really all I did for this character. It wasn't a quick project, but it definitely wasn't that hard to do. So the rest of the video, I'm going to show you guys some tricks and some new tools to maybe help speed up your workflow on your project here. So to do that, I'm just going to go ahead and hide all of my gear here. And what we're going to discuss right now is a new tool called the Quad Draw tool. I might have gone over this earlier when we were talking about face tools or edge tools. I can't remember which one, but I never really showed its full potential. We just weren't there yet. We had too many other things to learn. But this new workflow allow us to actually draw our shirt onto our ogre without having to just start from a cube and then push and pull verts. It can be very frustrating. The quad draw tool will help us get our proportions of our shirt correctly, as well as get our edge flow just the way we want it without having to worry about what kind of extrusions or edge insertions do you have to do to make sure that everything's a quad. We'll be able to draw out our own quad surfaces really easily using this method. So why don't we just get right into it? So the first thing we have to do is we have to say, okay, Maya, this ogre is what I want my reference model to be. This is the model that I want to draw on top of. So every time I draw a vertex or an edge or a face, it's going to adhere and magnetize to the surface of this model. So I'm going to unlock him off of my layers over here. And I'm going to, with him selected, make sure you see these little magnifying magnets up here. Notice how it says no live surface. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to select this first little magnet or last little magnet. And notice how it doesn't have any icons around. We just want the basic magnet. And you can see it converts the selected surface to a live surface. So what is a live surface? Well, I select it. Now we see that body origin mesh is live. So what does that mean? Well, it means I can't select it anymore. And I basically set it to be like, well, anything that I draw with the quad draw tool is going to magnetize to the surface of this body here. And I'm going to go in and still lock that out. So that's how we designate what reference model we want to draw on top of. So next I have to introduce the quad draw tool itself. So the easiest way to get to it is to go up here to the top right here and go to our modeling toolkit icon that you see right here. So I'll select it. And here we have our modeling toolkit. I'm going to come all the way down here and I'm going to select the quad draw tool. All right, so basically what the quad draw tool does is it allows you just to put down points and we can make polygons based on just drawing points. So if we hide our ogre there, we can see we've made all these new polygons. And guess what? Every time I drew a point, it magnetized to the surface of my ogre here. So if I go to wireframe mode in my layer, I can actually see how it magnetized. And that doesn't mean it's not going to intersect in some places. There's just not enough geometry to do a one-to-one match. There are going to be places where they intersect, But for our purposes, that's not going to matter too much. We're just getting the same basic proportions, the same basic shape. We're not doing a one-to-one match for how the topology lays down over our shirt lays down over our ogre. We're just trying to get the basic proportions, and that'll be just fine for our purposes. So with my quad draw tool selected, I'm going to show us how we can start laying down the vertices of our quad draw mesh. You saw me do a little bit of a preview a few seconds ago, but I'm going to explain exactly how to do that now. And it's really quite easy. Left mouse button, if you click once, it places this green little dot here. And your dot might vary. No, it's always going to be green, I guess. And then I can kind of go in and describe a four-sided polygon, like so. So I've made 4 vertices just by left-clicking on top of my live reference mesh. And that's how you create it. That's how you create general vertices using this tool. So we have the vertices drawn. How do we make the face? Well, with any vertice drawn on your model, if you hold down the shift button and get close to the vertices, see how we have this preview of a green square here? That's just from holding down the left shift key. If I want to actually draw this face and make it a physical face while I'm holding shift, I'm just going to press left click. And we can see that we have a nice face that roughly adheres to the surface of our ogre. It does intersect a little bit, but that's because we drew vertices on either side of this edge right here. Like I said, we shouldn't have to worry about it too much. This is topology in a nutshell. We're making an approximation of our reference model. So why don't we use the same techniques we were just using? Let's go back to our modeling toolkit. And why don't we draw a series of vertices and keep making faces? So I'll draw 2 right there. And guess what? Even though these vertices already are sharing a face, if I hold down shift, we can connect those 2. So I'll draw 2 here, do there. Then I can even go up here and do that. I mean, I can even get real sloppy. And it does its best to guess what kind of quad you're trying to draw here. So notice how it's got a little rhombus there, and then a weird another little whatever. It's just trying to find the best way to connect these vertices together. So really honing in on what vertices you're trying to draw is going to be very important here. So I'll undo those 2 points, but I'll make this one little vertice right there. And there we have a nice little mesh of faces just from placing down points with left mouse click, then holding down shift to get a preview of how I want to draw this face. Put one down at the corner, and we've used 1, 2, 3 vertices and that 4th one that I just drew to make that face right there. So with a little bit of geometry created, what if I wanted to come in and add more topology, more faces? Well, inserting an edge loop would come in really handy right here. So to do that, I'm just going to hold down the control key. And look, you can even see a little preview of a green line saying this is where you're going to put it. And if I hover over a vertical edge, it'll show me the horizontal edge loop. It'll draw through it. If I hover over a horizontal edge, it'll do a vertical preview of an edge loop. So I can add a little bit of geometry there and a little bit of there. And notice how as I add geometry, these new verts are automatically snapping to my ogre. So it might be tempting to come in and really just add a lot more topology here to get an exact match of what we're trying to do. But you got to be careful though. We're trying to make more of a low poly model at this point. So adding too much topology, though it may adhere to the original reference of your model a little bit more, we won't worry about it too much. We'll let our subdivisions later on when we finalize our quad draw meshes to take care of that for us. Plus, there's a few other little things we could do as well. So that's how you do draw edge loops. Control and left click will insert one. Well, what if you wanted to bisect these faces completely in half? Well, let's hold down Control and let's hold down the middle mouse button. See how my edge loops are sticking snapping directly to the center of my mesh here. So this is control and middle mouse button. No matter where I put it, it's going to create it right in the middle. So see how my preview is over here? If I press middle mouse button, it's going to snap to the middle no matter what. So that's how we can subdivide and bisect our faces so we can get, a nice subdivided face. So that face was now used to be one face. Now it's four evenly divided faces just by snapping our edge loops to the middle of it. So there might come a time where you make a mistake. Let's say you drew some random points over here. Well, if you want to delete anything in that you've drawn so far using the quad draw tool, then you just hold down Control Shift and see how whenever I'm hovering over just the reference model, see how it has like this negative sign? That means I'm not going to do any operation. There's no equivalence for what I'm holding down. There's no tool to be used. But as soon as I'll hover over this point while holding down Shift and Control, see how that turns into an X? If I just left click, I can get rid of it. Control Shift left click, Control Shift left click. I can even Control Shift left click edges. I can even Control Shift left click faces. So any kind of polygonal component you want to delete, you can. Also want to make a note that you can delete multiple things together. So I'm kind of hovering over anything in the scene here, and I'm going to click left click. So I'm holding down Shift, Control, and left click. And then nothing happens. Well, sometimes with these tools and our quad draw tool, these different operations, sometimes you have to be hovering over your quad draw mesh, and not hovering over your reference ogre body or whatever your reference is over there. So delete, sometimes we kind of have to hover over. And if I can click and drag, I can select multiple different components and just delete them all. But of course, the last thing I selected, Maya is saying you got to have at least one face when you're deleting something. It doesn't like you deleting the whole quad draw. So I brought back that geometry I had created earlier. And why don't we see how we can tweak some of the components? So we've learned how we can make new components, new faces. We've learned how we can delete components such as vertices, faces, and edges. Why don't we see how we can just move them around? Okay? And it's really quite easy. Hover over the component that you want to move. See how my green wireframe is turning to red as I hover over it. So there's a red face, there's a red edge, and there's a red vertice right there. Just left click and drag around. Middle mouse button works as well. The important thing to remember though is don't press anything. Just kind of hover your mouse over what you want to tweak, and you're able to move things around. But what happens if you want to move multiple components together? Well, what we're going to do now is we're going to hold down Control and Shift. And normally this would delete things if we left mouse clicked. But what if we middle mouse button click? See how it has an X? Well, as soon as I middle mouse button and click, I can move this whole edge loop. So you see how we have multiple edges being selected here? So this tool allows you to move edge flow like so, vertically and horizontally. So that's Control Shift middle mouse button. Be careful not to Control Shift left click because that'll delete. All right. We just want to be able to select our edges and middle mouse button, Control and left Shift drag. All right, so we've gone over how we can create continuous faces by left clicking, and shift clicking. So that's like 3 different things at once. What if there was a way where we could just make a new face with only one operation? Well, we can. If we hold down the Tab key, see how it says extend when you hover over your quad draw mesh? So this is kind of like an extrusion or an extend. So I'm holding down the Tab key, I'm left clicking, and boom, I'm able just to draw out faces really quickly. Well, what if I wanted to extrude more than just one edge at a time? We're going to hold down Tab, and this time we're going to hold the middle mouse button, and look at that. Oh, it's giving us a whole edge loop to extrude. Ah, so good. I want to do that. Wasn't the cleanest thing. So we can extrude multiple faces at a time now, or extend. The quad draw tool doesn't like to call it extrude, even though that's technically what you're doing. It likes to call it extend. All right. So you might have noticed if you're working around with me, or you can see that sometimes when I hold down the tab key, it goes from extend when I hover over my quad draw mesh, but when I'm not, it gives me this little looking guy. Well, that's the draw quad tool. So if you didn't want to start out by drawing four verts and then left clicking to draw your first quad, you can actually, let me delete these points here. You can actually just hold down tab, and if you hover over your reference model, that's your live reference model, you kind of see how it almost, this quad trails behind you. So if you kind of want to place it in line with what we're going down here, so I'm holding down tab and left click, and it draws that quad for me. So if I hold down tab and middle mouse button click and drag, I can control the size of this draw quad. So I can come down here and holding down tab, left click, holding down tab, middle mouse button to click and drag to resize. After I've resized it, then I can click. And then you can come in and hold down shift and connect your topology. But that's a little bit messy. So let's control shift, delete those guys right there. So you may get to the point where you're rocking right along. You've drawn out a lot of your quad draw mesh, but you'll notice that you just weren't. I don't know. Somewhere along the way, your bottom set of faces here just kept getting more and more skewed over there to the left. Well, we have a tool called the Relax Topology tool. We hold down the Shift button. See how we turned into a paintbrush that says Relax. We can just go through and we can kind of relax our topology so it flows a little bit more organically. All right. And there's an important setting um, in the quad draw options over here in your modeling toolbox. This relax setting right here. For right now, we're going to work with auto lock. And what that allows us to do is, as we're relaxing, if I start with an inner vertice right here, notice how it's relaxing all the vertices contained within the quad draw mesh. But if I try to go to a border edge, an outside edge here, it doesn't affect any of the verts up there. But yet, if I start on a border edge, it'll relax the border edges, but nothing in the center of my model here. So I can relax my border edges so it feels a little bit more continuous, a little bit more organic. Relax is really nice. And then I can go in and relax my inner verts so they match my border edges a little bit more now. So maybe those messy quads you were drawing out, maybe you don't have to be so careful when you're first drawing them out here. And be careful though, because sometimes when you relax the border edges, it can mess up your nice little square here. So you see how it's kind of shrinking it in there? Maybe we don't want to do that. Maybe we just want to kind of relax them right there and then readjust them by selecting the corner verts with the left mouse button. And we're just going in and we're relaxing, relaxing. And now we have a nice, good, organic topology. Notice how everything kind of just flows nicely. More or less, the faces are all kind of, really similar, really square, really rectangular. And now we don't have an atrocious looking quad draw mesh anymore. So let's go over, now that we've learned basically most of the tools that we're going to be working with to draw our quad draw meshes with, why don't we go through and look at some of the more important options within our quad draw. I've already talked about the auto wield right here, or actually I haven't. So auto wield is really nice. There might be instances where, let's say I extend this edge up here, but then maybe you wanted to come in and extend this. Well, I got a little seam here. They're not snapping. So what we can do with auto wheel turned on, and we can control the tolerance of the magnetic snap here. If we get them this vert close, see how it snaps too, and automatically welds. If I had turned auto weld off, oh, let me undo that, And let's extend another face. See how our verts won't snap and merge together no matter how hard we get them to come together. So that could be a problem. So if I turn auto weld back on, I can snap them like so. It even works if I'm extending a face like this. I can even put this face close to the next one, and those verts will even merge like so. So a little close up, I'm getting them close, and then push them together, auto weld. And we can control the tolerance of this. So we can have it snap from really far away, or we can really lower the tolerance and have them only snap if they get really close. So they have to get really close to snap. So the tolerance there is pretty important. Extend is pretty interesting. If we click on the extend arrow right here, edge and loop kind of function almost identically, but I just wanted to really talk about the border extend. That means when you're extending edges by holding down tab. So we have it set to border now. So now when we extend, notice how it extrudes all the way from the border of my mesh. So all the way around. And it could be useful in certain situations, but you got to be really careful when you use it because you can create some really bad edge flow by doing that. So notice right here, we create a pole, basically a vertice where 3 or more edges meet. And typically we want to try to avoid poles if we can help it. And I've already kind of talked about the relax option right here with the auto lock. Auto lock basically means if I relax in the middle of the verts right here in the middle of my quad draw mesh, then I'm only going to relax uh, the inner vertices. I'm not going to be able to affect the outside border at all. And vice versa, if I start relaxing on the border edge, I'm only going to be able to relax the border edge. And notice how I can't touch anything on the inside. I can go down here and relax those. So I like auto lock. If it allows you to kind of just relax as you please. But if you want to, only relax border vertices, no matter how hard you try, then you can set it to only border vertices, and no matter where you start relaxing at, it'll only do border vertices or only interior vertices. But I like to keep it at auto lock. So why don't we go through a little bit of a workflow using this quad draw to draw a shirt for this tubby guy right here. I'm only going to draw the right side of the shirt. Um, if this character was actually one-headed and he'd be symmetrical, so I could get away with just drawing one side of his shirt and then making it symmetrical over to the other side. But let's just pretend like he is symmetrical. So I'm just going to draw the right side of his shirt. And from there, it's just the whole mirror duplication workflow that you should be very familiar with by now to complete the rest of your shirt. Because from the neck down, this guy is symmetrical. All right, so why don't we get started with the very first thing with drawing a shirt? And it can be a little intimidating to start. Well, where do I start to make sure my topology is really nice? And how do I make sure I have really nice edge flow? So we're going to start at a very particular place first. We're going to start at the bottom of this guy's belly, the bottom of his shirt here. If I bring in my concept art, maybe I can see, okay, so his shirt's not going to start till right underneath his pictorial region or his movies right there. Those are some saggins right. Ugh, this guy is attractive. All right, okay, I'm getting fixated on whatever. Let's draw the bottom of his shirt, guys. All right, so to start off, we have our model still live. All right, and I guess I'll undo that so we can start from the very beginning. So I'll select my reference model, click my little magnet here. Now body original mesh is now live. Now everything I draw with quad draw will magnetize to the surface of Fatty right here. And then I'm going to lock him down. And it's going to be helpful to switch between wireframe and shaded mode here. And we'll make use of that in a little bit. Then I'm going to go to my quad draw menu or my mesh tool menu right here. And we're going to select quad draw. And we're going to start at the very base of this guy's shirt. I'm going to start right in the center right here. I'm going to start my first little line, my first vert, rather, right there. Right under, maybe a little bit lower. But I'm going to make sure I start at the center point, the mirror duplication 0, Y0 axis center point right there. All right. So I'm going to go back into mesh mode, and I'm going to draw my very first quad. So I'm going to give myself 4 corners. So I've left clicked 4 corners, and I hit shift, and there we go. There's my very first polygon on here. And then I'm going to tweak it a little bit. Maybe I feel like I drew it a little too high. So I'm just going to left click with no shift or control modifiers. I'm just going to left click and drag that quad exactly how I want it. And then I'm just going to hold down tab, and I'm going to extend. Oh, what the heck happened? We still have extend set to border. I'm going to set it to edge. That'll allow me just to extend edges. I'm going to kind of come down here, and I'm just going to keep drawing a nice continuous ring of edges all the way around this guy here. We'll go into wireframe mode, and there we go. There is his center point line right there. Now I have to go in and clean this up a little bit. I have to make sure that my edges aren't getting skewed. Kind of get them going straight up and down as best you can. I mean, relax will come and take care of that when we go and relax it at the end. Maybe I'm going to bring this down a little bit more. So it's a really organic little flow of workflow. So there's my very first bottom of my shirt. Now I'm going to use tab and middle mouse click. Tab and middle mouse click. Oh, let's undo that. To extend this edge loop all the way up. I'm going to go into shaded mode to maybe just right below the middle of his arms. And I've noticed I've kind of extended my edge loops up too close to the underarms here. So I'm going to, what's the command for moving a whole edge loop? It's a tricky one because it is the delete command, but instead of deleting it with the left mouse click, we just middle mouse click. And then I'm going to come in here and kind of just readjust some of my edge flow. Maybe even come in with relax. And I can relax it a little bit at this point. There we go. I got it on auto lock, so it's only locking. And and this is a great moment here. I have messed up my topology somehow. I think I should have had my extend set to loop because my edge extensions weren't working quite right. So I'm going to come in here, control, shift, and left click these faces I got messed up. And I'm going to rebuild the rest of this edge loop, holding down tab and extend. And I have auto weld turned on. So I can just extend and they'll automatically weld right here. Extend and automatically weld right there. Extend, weld, extend, weld. There we go. Now I'm going to come in and relax things a little bit. Relax my border edges, making sure that these border edges kind of remain on the 0 axis. Then I'm going to come in and relax my inner vertices here. All right, great. That's a great start to the bottom of the shirt. And if you're having trouble, like wireframe mode is great, but it makes everything wireframe. What if I just wanted to see the wireframe of my reference model, but the solid shaded part of what I'm currently quad drawing? Well, we can just go into my layers and turn on wireframe mode on my body layer. That way we can see solid faces on my quad draw, but a nice little transparent wireframe of my reference live model. So we're hitting our first big challenge in our quad draw process right here. We're going to have to figure out some way to create nice topology, nice edge flow between this nice little ring of shirts shirt we got going at the bottom here with the rings around the holes of our shirt. It can be a little bit tricky if you don't know exactly how to tackle it. So what we'll do is we already have our nice edge flow set up down here. I'm going to give myself a little bit more space underneath that armpit right there. Now I'm going to switch gears and I'm going to start drawing a nice ring of edges and faces around all the holes, my head hole and my arm hole. So I'm going to do that by, you know what? I'm just going to start with hold down tab and I'm just going to adjust its size with holding down tab and middle mouse button. And then I'm just going to drag it along until it lines up roughly in the same spot. Yeah, maybe I need to comb it. There we go. So the trick is kind of getting that right little seam right where the arm kind of meets the body. And that's where we want to draw our ring around this seam between his armpit all the way up to his shoulder. And then from here, it's a matter of extending out, but be careful since we're going in a radial pattern. We kind of have to adjust for that. Make sure that your edges radially extend outwards, because if not, it'll be easy for your edges to kind of get all skewed and weird looking. See, that doesn't look very good right there. So what we'll do is we'll extend out some edges and then we'll kind of go in here and clean up some stuff. So I notice how I'm tweaking my outside border edge of my armhole here, just keeping it clean. And I'm going to push that down a little bit. I want to make sure I get a nice armhole before I worry about having to attach it to the bottom of my shirt there. So tab, left click, extend. There we go. And then bring that edge up. Why don't we wireframe this a little bit? You can even kind of maybe see on the topology of your reference model where your actual arm connects. On this model, it's a little bit more difficult. I think it's mainly around here. They have some very distinct edge flow going on. So we'll do this, and then with auto wheel turned on, I'll just move and snap these vertices together. All right, why don't we bring back shaded guy here and just do the best we can. I know some of it's a little obscure, but we'll go into wireframe with 4 on the keyboard. And I'm mainly just looking for a nice radial ring around my arm here. And that looks pretty good. Make sure that I'm not missing geometry. Like there's more faces over here than over here. We want to kind of keep symmetrical amount of faces all the way around. And guess what? From now on, from here, I have just a random stray point randomly over here on my character here. So I'm going to go into my quad draw menu here, and at the very bottom, you can go to clear dots, and it'll just delete any stray vertices that you've drawn so far. So that'll be helpful. So now I'm just going to snap and weld these vertices to the closing matching pair. All right, so it's getting a little weird right there. So we'll just kind of have to come in and, this is a great example of a pole right here. Notice how it was really weird. I had to kind of stretch this up and then stretch this down. But in the end, it's just what we got to do. And then we're kind of left with maybe not enough geometry down there. I'm going to undo that. We'll come back to that, and if we need to fix it, we will. So basically, we've drawn a nice armhole, and we've connected it to the bottom of my shirt. Why don't we do the same for my neck here? So I'll start. I'm just giving him a nice little collar. And if you want, here's another way you could do it. You could just start out by drawing the points and just not drawing faces yet. I'm just drawing points around what I think his neck should be. And then we can go through and draw the polygons. So I kind of was able to hone in on the inner circle of verts. Then I just come in and create that last corner vert right there. And then shift click and left click. Oh, that's not what I wanted there. There we go. So things are getting a little weird here. So what we're going to have to do now is we're going to have to make some more poles where our topology is just going to have to kind of crash into one another. So we'll make a face there, a face there. And our geometry's gotten a little bit off right now. This doesn't seem to be a good fit. So I'm going to undo that. Now it's our job to figure out how to get our geometry working here. And sometimes it just takes, maybe separating them a little bit. And I need to get this face connected to that face. Okay. So I'm going to shrink my armhole for the time being. And we're going to see what we can do here. See, I want to avoid triangles. Now you can see how it can be a little bit difficult to get our geometry just right. So I'm going to kind of shrink it in here. I got to close that neck hole. So it took a little bit of making my neck hole a little bit smaller than I originally planned. That way I could use my shift to snap them together. And look, we're already starting to see a nice way to connect them, like so. All right, and then from here, it's just a matter of finishing it on out. So I'm going to extend. Oh, I'm going to extend. Let me go back into my extend tool. So my extend is set to loop. So I'm going to set it back to edge just so I can left click and drag and extend one at a time. And there we go. So now I'm trying just to connect the dots together, keep as many quads going as I can. So I'll extend to there. And nice little, so I'll use tab to extend out and then left click and shift to patch that. So left shift and click. I'll show you what I did there a second. Tab and left click to extend out and then auto willed. So these faces are now together. And I already have 4 perfect vertices lined up together to make a new quad. So I'll hold down shift and left click and make that quad. But we're running into a problem here. All right. We're running out of geometry here. I need more verts to get this going. Oh, no, I don't. Actually, is that an end gun? I don't believe it is. It's just a really weird pole. All right. So we have a pole that has 5 intersecting edges right there. I think that'll be okay for the time being. 1, 2, 3, 4. No end guns here. So it is kind of like a puzzle. It's just knowing how to connect your geometry together and, working with poles, basically vertices where multiple edges, maybe more than 3 or 5 edges connect instead of a nice intersection here with a left, right, top, and bottom edge connecting. Those are those poles I'm talking about. So why don't we come up here and just finish our back? We'll just start up by holding down tab and middle mouse button, and then we'll just come in here. And you might be running out of topology or running out of geometry, running out of verts. Oh my goodness, I'm running out of verts. Now I have this one section with hardly any verts because I'm trying to really nail the proportions, get a really good approximation. But now I'm left with an area where there's just not much geometry there, and I can't describe that area. Well, I'm going to hold down Control, and we're going to insert some geometry by inserting an edge loop now. So I'll hold down Control and left click, and there we go. I have an edge loop. It actually created another little articulation point for my underarm area right here. So that actually works pretty good. It allows me to define the underarm area a little bit more. And then I'll hold down shift and let's do a little bit of relaxing. Okay. And relax is set to border vertices only. This changes it back to auto lock. So if I start relaxing in the inner verts, it'll only touch inner verts. It won't touch those border edges. So, once you get comfortable with this process, You can switch between relaxing and merging and extending, and it'll be really quite natural to you after a while. Okay, so that's auto weld going crazy there. So let's just extend one face at a time, like so. And then we kind of have to fill in the rest of this little shoulder piece right here. We're missing our little shoulder back area. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my body layer, and let's go wireframe so I can see the actual, oh, looks like we need to go in and hold down shift and left click to plug that hole. All right, so what's the easiest way to do this? We might have to add some more geometry here to reconcile what's going on. So I'm going to actually just extend up like so, and then I'm just going to make it work, and then I can go back in and add some edge loops if I'm finding I'm lacking on the geometry. And I think I'm going to find that I am. Even though these are kind of matching up pretty okay. And this is an interesting little area right here. I'm going to insert some more geometry right there and snap it and snap it. There we go. So anytime you're running out of like vertices to snap together to make a really nice geometry, I'm not sure if I quite like that. So I'm going to go in and deconstruct this part. Well, I need that little part right there. I know why I don't like it, because I don't have enough geometry right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of come in here and reconstruct this. I'm going to come in and I'm going to make an extra row of edges right there. And then we're going to snap our auto snap our verts just to give myself a little bit more geometry to work with. Kind of get it going up there. My relax tool will fix most of that issue right here. But then we have a problem right here. We don't have a vert to work with. So I think what we're just going to have to do is we're going to have to insert control and left click, insert an edge loop down the front there. It'll add a little bit more geometry there, but it'll allow us to complete our shirt. And then we can go in and relax. Let's relax our border edges. Whoa, that's crazy. Maybe get them a little bit more lined up. So we're just relaxing on our border edges with auto lock mode on relax selected right over here. So relax will be auto lock. Okay, maybe not. There we go. Let's just relax our border edges just so they're flowing along our reference model a little bit easier. Then I relax that corner piece and it brings it out all the way over there. All right, so why don't we maybe relax our arm pieces too, our armhole borders. And then I like the way my neck looks. I don't want to relax that. Then we'll just go in and relax our inner verts now. So they just really nicely lay out. So there's not so much maybe weird crinkled topology going on. So I'm going down shift and left click. And there we go. My geometry is really leveling out quite nicely now. Maybe bring that down right there. I'm going to switch it between border and inner verts is the way to go. All right, so now I just need to do one more thing, and that's I'll do tab and middle click, and I'll just extend out the sleeve. And then that looks pretty bad, so why don't I relax the border edges around the sleeve. And then I'll insert 2 edge loops and then relax that. Notice how my sleeve now properly encompasses the arm. All right, so why don't we hide our body? And that looks pretty good. Just going to relax a few more things. And even though our body's hidden, we're still snapping to its surface. And I've created a nice little shirt. We've had a few weird areas where we had some poles, like right here, 3 edges instead of 4, or maybe up there might have been 5 edges, or at some point, like right here, we have 5 edges connected instead of 4. So, but we managed them, and you just can't avoid poles. It's just the way it goes. But it looks pretty good. All right, so why don't we finalize this? So to finalize our quad draw mesh, why don't we select our selection tool? And there we have a brand new mesh object. We go to our outliner. I bet it'll be called something like just regular old poly surface. And then why don't we deselect our magnetize button up here, so our ogre is no longer a live surface. But we definitely want to have him hidden. But right now we just have this flat piece of shirt just kind of sitting on top of him there. All right, well, first I'm going to make sure that we're going to set ourselves up for a nice mirror duplication here. So I'm going to select all the border vertices right in the middle of my grid and just snap them right to the center there. Go double click your move tool over here to the left and go to move snap settings and make sure retain component spacing is turned off. This will make sure that if you have like a stray vert, they're all jagged, right, like so. If you have them all selected, retain component spacing will make sure they all snap together like so. All right, so we got our axis vertices perfectly lined up. So before we duplicate though, why don't we give ourselves some mass? All right, so we're gonna select our newly made shirt. We'll go to edit mesh and we'll go to extrude, and then we'll just pull out like so. So we've given our shirt some mass now, maybe a little bit too much. Let me bring back my body so we can see. Well, that's looking pretty good. And then what we'll do, we want to delete those inside faces. All right, we only want the outside faces that'll be visible, but we also want to keep the border edges around here. So we'll hold down Shift and the less than sign, or greater than sign rather. So we've got our border faces selected. Then we'll hold down Shift and do an inverse selection on the whole shirt. And that will effectively select all the inside faces of my shirt here. And then I'll just delete them. And then if I do a smooth on my shirt here, I mean, good Lord, look at that. That's so good looking. So easy and so good looking. Really fast workflows if you can get used to working with the draw quad tool. So you may have to go back through and just keep practicing, experimenting with what all the different commands do, like all the controls and shift modifiers. What are they actually doing? And even though you may have a good shirt drawn like this, there will be some places where we can see our model kind of clipping through some areas, and that's just to be expected. And we just sometimes you will have to tweak a few verts here and there to make sure that that's not happening. And sometimes when you select your mesh, you'll see the underlying geometry. Well, as long as it's unselected and it's not showing, that's fine. So we just have to sometimes select a few verts here and maybe pull them out a little bit. Just select the verts around there, the trouble areas, and just pull them out so they're encompassing our model a little bit more. All right. I know I didn't get it all, but I'm going to waste all day doing that. So there might be even some areas where we just don't have enough geometry to really describe the shirt, or to keep the shirt from clipping into our character here. So you might even have to go in and do a insert edge loop and then just manually pull it out let me turn on my texture. This is where texture really helps. It really allows you to see exactly where your shirt's at. I might even have to do a rotation. And you know what? Maybe even inserting a support edge loop. Oh, what did I just do? Inserting a support edge loop around can help too. It'll help retain that form just a little bit more. All right, so if I spend a little bit more time with it, I would tug these vertices up and make sure that my shirt is totally encompassing my character. So there is a little bit of a cleanup to do just to tug those vertices around to get it going exactly like we want. But for the most part, I mean, this is looking pretty good. I can even put support edge loops around the holes and bottom of my shirt here. And it's a little bit thick, but you know, it's a cartoon, whatever. So at some point you would have done a mirror duplication around, but you guys know how to do that by now. All right. So now that I've shown you how to use the draw quad and the uh, make the your character live surface, so you can use it as a reference, so your points magnetized to it, you can pretty much get started on creating any type of gear that conforms to the body of your character. So belts, wristwatches. I mean, let me delete this. We've already made it, and I'll bring in what I made. Even those suspenders will work. I use the draw quad to make the suspenders. It's kind of just using your the proportions of your original character, so you can really nail exactly what you're trying to create, like so. All right, so that does it for the draw quad tool. Hope you find that useful. So now we're going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about another little modeling technique called the lattice tool. All right, the lattice tool is going to help us create the nice conforming shape of these firecrackers around the waist of our character. Otherwise, we'd have to place each one of these firecrackers and adjust every single little firecracker individually to pull him in. But the lattice tool is going to allow us to kind of organically mold a nice flat object around a character. So that may not make sense. So why don't we start making this belt here? So I'm going to hide this gear. I'm going to keep my ogre up. So if I reference this, the first thing I'm going to have to do, and there's a reverse face, I'll be able to fix that because we're about to remake it. We're going to make the twine that holds all the firecrackers together. And I got a little trick for that. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to go to Create, Polygon Primitives, and we're going to start with a nice helix. And I'm going to zoom in on it. Pretty small, so why don't I scale it up a little bit? Oh, that's actually a little too big now. All right, so we'll be able to scale it in the end if it's not quite right. So I'm basically going to have to create two pieces of fuse twined together. So what I'm going to do, I've created my first helix. Now I'm going to duplicate special and make sure it's an instance and duplicate that special. And then I'll rotate it 180 degrees. And then I'll go to the attribute editor over here on the right side, attribute editor. And that's going to allow me to adjust both helixes, and I can get the perfect type of fuse. So first I'm going to increase their height, maybe add some coils, increase their height. And notice how since we have a, notice since it's a duplicate special, I'm able to really just kind of edit both together. What I need to do now is maybe reduce some of the geometry here because we're going to smooth it. I'm going to go ahead and press 3 and smooth this. And then I'll reduce the number of coils. We don't want something that is going to be, there we go. We don't want something that's too poly heavy. And then I'll mess with the radius. And there we go. Some nice firecracker coil. I think I might need to make it a little bit taller though. Maybe add a few more coils. All right. So now it's up to me to I'm going to group these together with Control G, bring up my outliner. So that's my coil group here. So basically what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make my firecracker strand flat. I'm not going to worry about modeling it around the waist yet. All right, so I'm going to get this at 90 degrees. I'm going to hide my ogre for right now. Well, first, I'm going to make sure my proportions are good because this coil of, yeah, it might be a little long. So maybe I can still go into my helix attribute editor. Yeah, I can still adjust the height. I think it's a little too thick too. All right, that'll be fine. I'll make it work. All right, so that's the fuse coil that we'll use for my firecrackers. And I'm just going to leave it flat now. Now let's get rid of my ogre. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make use of some really nice, we're going to make use of the lattice tool now. So I'm going to go ahead and combine. We're going to freeze. Why don't we go ahead and combine these two together. Then we're going to freeze. So now I have one nice fused entwined firecracker string. And why don't we go ahead and create the actual firecrackers for my guy here. So we'll start with a cylinder. And we'll make them a little bit skinnier and taller. And we'll get them lined up. Insert edge loops so when we subdivide, they look fine. All right, and then we're going to duplicate that. All right, we'll duplicate it. We'll kind of get them an extra duplication there. Kind of get them roughly along this. And you know what? Before I do that, I'm going to adjust their pivot point because I'm going to pivot my fireworks so they're not all straight together. But if I pivot it from the center, then the firework doesn't look like it's connected to the fuse anymore. So I'm going to hold down D for dog, V as in vector. I'm just going to bring in, well, it looks like I got a snap on too. So I'm going to snap my pivot point at the bottom so now I can rotate it. And it looks like it's still connected to the fuse there. I'll duplicate this. Let me turn off that snap. And then I'm just going to rotate it 180 degrees the X direction. So now I can kind of just, whoop, and that one looks like that. So I've set myself up for greatness. And why don't we experiment with duplicate special a little bit more. I'm going to create a whole, and I'm not going to do an instance anymore. I'm going to create a whole gaggle of these guys. I'm going to start out with doing 4 first. So I have to figure out how far I need to translate. So let's do 1.5 in the X. That looks perfect. So now I know the direction. We're just going to make a bunch. All right, so where did my fuse run out? So I don't need these. All right, so those are my firecrackers. Okay. Perfect. All right, so what we're going to do next is, I think in my original gear, I kind of had them go downwards like this. So why don't we mimic that downwards? So here we're going to use our first taste of our lattice tool. All right, if I can just select, I'm going to go ahead and group these together so I can easily hide them and whatnot. So I want to go in and group them together. So now I have a fuse. I'll just call this fuse, and then I'll call these the crackers. So with my fuse selected, now I'm actually going to use the lattice tool. All right, so I'm going to select my fuse, but we're not going to go into modeling. We're actually going to go into animation. This will be the first time going into this menu up here. And then I'm going to go to animate deform and choose lattice. So instantly you can see we have Why don't I go ahead and hide these crackers? I have this green box surrounding my fuse now. So with my lattice selected and my outliner, with my lattice selected, I'm going to go to my attribute editor and go to lattice shape over here. So we have our regular lattice mesh, and then we have lattice shape. And then I'm going to increase the number of subdivisions on my lattice here. So see how I have multiple ones over here? And look what we can do now. It's beautiful. It's a thing of beauty. All right, we're able to model and conform our fuse based on this very simple piece of geometry. See how it's stretching and deforming our fuse for us? Oh, it's such a good little tool. All right, so when we're done, our lattice is still kind of connected to our geometry. We got to figure out a way to disconnect our lattice. It's kind of like when we use NURBS and curves. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Edit and delete all by type history. So we're left with the the curved piece of fuse, but no more lattice. So now we're going to bring our crackers back. Well, you know what? Why didn't I just use the lattice and with my crackers at the same time? Hmm. Let's undo that and see if we can just do that all together. Maybe we can get away with it. Maybe we can't. So undo, undo, undo. All right. So we'll select all of this. We'll go to animate to form, create a lattice, and I think mine might have just blown up. Okay, no, there we go. So there's my new lattice. Now it encompasses my firecrackers and my fuse. Oh my goodness. Look at what lattice is doing to my actual firecrackers. It's deforming. It's deforming them. Now my firecrackers are all. Oh, that stinks. So I can't do that. I'm going to actually have to maybe figure out how to populate down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video and remake the fuse going downward so we don't have to re-see me do that. I'll be right back. All right, and now that I have my fuse remade, I kind of even did a little bit extra stuff. I used my lattice to maybe scrunch up the fuse over here and then maybe stretch it over here and kind of just make it look like it's not one big long strand. There we go. Or one, computer-made strand of fuse. Perfect. So we'll do the delete all by type history again. So now I'm left with a nice looking piece of organic fuse. It's stretched in some. That's perfect. I like that a lot. So let's bring back my crackers, and now we're gonna have to figure out a way to get my firecrackers following it. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a temporary layer just for my fuse here, and we'll call this. I'll add selected. We'll call this just the temp layer. I usually like to have a temp layer for situations like this, where I can lock down, so I don't have to worry about messing around with that too much. And what we'll do is we'll just kind of come in and we'll just have to hand do this stuff. We'll kind of get it to follow where the firecracker is kind of going up and down a little bit, just to create a little bit of variation. Modeling in imperfections on your models is actually what makes your models seem more believable, because Maya makes everything so perfect. So just a little bit of love and care will do that well. And then what we're going to do is we're going to actually just okay. So I'm rotating. I want them to rotate along the same axis. So if I double click my rotation tool and set it to world, perfect. Now they're rotating together. So they were rotating around the object, which was making them kind of scissor like that. But if I double click my rotate and change it to world, I can get them to do that. And then from here, it's just the duplication game a little bit. And then if they're starting to kind of collide, then do what they would do in the real world and kind of bunch up together. That's why we set our pivot points just so. And it's just a simple matter of keeping going, adding a little bit of variation. So this process could be a little bit tedious. So I'll do a few more, then I'll pause it, and you can see what I came up with. I'm literally just going down the line here. And I'm repositioning them like so. So notice how, I'm kind of mimicking how they would get bunched up as they curve downwards. And maybe that one kind of just really falls off the... I'll do a few more for us so we can see my brilliance in action. All right, I'm going to pause it, and I'm going to go ahead and make this happen all the way down here. So I finished it coming on down. You can see how I kind of get some variation. Oh, it's fanning out, it's clumping up, but it's spread out up here. And then I'm just going to go in and select random ones over here and just kind of rotate them. Just select random ones again, rotate them a little bit. Just randoms again, and just rotate. A little bit of rotation. A little bit of rotation. And that's all possible because I was mindful of the rotation of my firecracker before I started duplicating it. And there we go. There's my string of firecrackers as they droop down off of my belt. And why don't we go ahead and mesh combine these all into one. So I'm going to unhide my fuse, and then let's go back into modeling, mesh, combine. So if we go to my outliner, let's delete all history. I have firecrackers. But we're not done. We need to get, let's do a new gear. I want to delete these old firecrackers. I need to get these firecrackers wrapping around my belt here. Can you guess what I'm going to do? Yep, I'm going to use the lattice tool. All right, so let's do that. So I'm going to pick out my starting point. So I want my firecrackers to kind of start right here. So I'm pushing this point into my belt right there. And then I'm going to go to animation. And let's do an animate to form lattice. And then with my lattice shape selected in my outliner, I'm going to go to attributes. This little button up here. Lattice shape. And I'm going to increase the amount of subdivisions. And then I'm just going to get to work. All right. So you know what? I'm going to have trouble selecting those. I'm going to select all my lattice points at this point and kind of get them going in the right direction. All right. There we go there. And you know what? I think I got too many of the lattice points. It's going to be a pain to... It's going to be a pain to adjust that many. Oh, looks like I'm already locked. Let me undo that. Maybe as soon as you start messing with it, it locks in how many lattice points you have. So yeah, I'm gonna work with 6. That should be fine. Maybe I'll do 7. So make sure you know how many points of articulation you want in your lattice before you start messing with them. All right. So fewer points means I have to position. And if we kind of rotate them and push them the right way, then the actual firecrackers won't look too deformed. Like so. So you can barely notice the deformation of the fireworks because we're kind of just subtly rotating and positioning them. And this is so much more convenient than modeling it as it fits along the actual ogre's belt. His arm's in the way. I'm just going to tweak this a little bit. Maybe push it into the belt a little bit more. Do the same over here. We are getting a little bit of weird deformation, but rotating it gets it right back on track. You know what? I think we're kind of deforming a little bit too much there. So just by articulating, a few points of vertices, I'm going to go ahead and just shove them where they need to be. We're going to rotate this one big time. And then we're going to take this bottom one and move it out. All right. And there we go. We have made a complex shape. We used some trickery, some special duplications, and the lattice tool to create a really cool detail. And there's my new fireworks hanging off of my belt. He's ready for war, baby. Okay, so that pretty much does it for all the tips and tricks that I wanted to show you guys. The quad draw method and using that lattice tool was really handy for those fireworks there. So a few more tricks up your sleeve to help improve the speed of your workflows. So why don't we talk about the last part of your assignment. Not only you're going to have to model all these pieces of gear, but I want to see if you can fire off a few renders for me. And I already have made a tutorial on how to render characters in YouTube, and I'll have it linked in this outline that you're following right now. I'll also have it linked on your Moodle page there. So following this tutorial will help you get set up with making some really nice renders. It talks about how to set up lights in the scene, and set up your camera, set up your render paths. And it's not too long of a video. And if we go to the very end here, we can maybe see some of the results. Well, maybe not. All right, well, just check this video out at your own speed. And I want to see you guys put out a few renders of your character. And granted, you're not going to have any textures on your character, but we're not going to worry too much about textures. If you want to try to texture, I'm not going to count off if you attempt it. I just want to make sure you guys have really nice, clean geometry. If you have extra time after your renders, maybe try rendering and texturing your gear by yourselves. All right, good luck, everybody. Hope you have fun with this assignment. It's one of my favorite things to do is to make props and weapons and stuff for characters. It's probably my favorite thing to model. So I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. Thanks.